So the button wasn't showing. There you go. Okay. So, all right. So again, these agricultural frontiers became places where, particularly away from the populated regions into the rural areas to develop resources, to exploit resources, you know, whether it was agriculture, lumber, like you see the picture here, in mining in many cases. So those were a way. But yeah, the same thing happened in Mexico and Argentina, many countries where this pattern of population was going on. All right? Now, so like I say, 75 to 80% of the population live in cities as a result of, again, much rural to urban migration, resulting on this sort of exodus. It's still happening. It's happening all over the world. And especially in the developing world, it's happening where people move from rural areas into cities. And that continues to happen. Again, as that happens, as you bring people from the rural areas, it tends to have impacts on the culture of the city, and of course has a lot of economic factors as a result of that. One of the big things that happens in Latin America and in many places in the developing world is that usually you're going to have a major city that controls just about everything going on in the country, and it has, like the term calls, urban primacy. It basically is a huge cluster of population with a lot of resources that are basically concentrated on that city. Um, uh, Basically, the concept of urban primacy is a condition where a country has a primate city that is basically 3 or 4 times larger than any other in the country. Yeah, the picture that you see here is Buenos Aires. That is the case for Argentina, where basically Argentina, Buenos Aires is bigger, 3 or 4 times bigger than any other city in Argentina. Mexico City, the same thing. Guadalajara, who's the second city, is a third, basically, of the size of Mexico City. And again, you see that all over Latin America. You don't see it in other places, but this is very much seen in Latin America. Again, a lot of it also comes from sort of the legacy that was left from the Spanish period, that everything needed to be concentrated into one area that could be most easily managed from Spain or from Portugal. All right? Now, the pattern of settlement, and particularly in cities, is a lot different than the way it is here in the United States or in North America, for instance. And I think when we were talking about what we see, sort of the model that we see in North America, is we see that usually in the central business districts, so like the center of the city, there tend to be, again, this small changes here and there. But in North America, very much, people go to work in the city and then they leave to the suburbs. They live out away from the city. And some of the, uh, you know, poorer districts, some of the poorer neighborhoods tend to be in the inner city. In fact, that's where the term comes from, inner city dwellings. Well, in Latin America, it is different. And again, it also has roots on the colonial period and how cities were developed. You see what you see on what I'm sort of pointing out with the arrow here is what they call the Latin America city model. Um, uh, so happens that this model was created by Dr. Ford and Griffiths. Dr. Ford was one of my professors at San Diego State. He recently passed away, but he was one of the top urbanists in the world. And him, along with other Professor Griffiths, they developed this system explaining a model of how cities are organized in Latin America. And so again, as opposed to the North American model, the wealth is actually in the middle, as opposed to like you see on the like you see in the North American model. A lot of the industrial parts are usually away from the main center of the city, but you know, a lot of, just like in North America as well, a lot of the, what they call the central business district is in the middle of the city, but people also live around there. You see the areas in blue and some of the areas in orange. That's where the wealthiest people live. The wealthiest, so like the all wealth of the city live in those areas. Then as opposed to the model that we see in North America. Now, there's a few developments that we see in North America as well, where you have some sort of middle class residential tract. The middle class in Mexico is not the middle like the middle class here. Uh, Many of these individuals are working class people. In some cases, they government housing that is set up in those places for workers that perhaps are working on a industrial park or so on. But the lower classes and the lower socioeconomic people live in the periphery, it's called the periférico. So these areas in purple, that's where the sort of the poor people will live. In many cases, some of these areas are not even official. They are what they call squatter settlements. Many of the squatter settlements, and they go by different names. They've been called favelas, ranchos, barrios jóvenes, pueblos nuevos, different ways that they call them, but they usually are at the periphery of where the wealth is in the city. And again, that's different than the North American model. You can see different pictures in Caracas, Venezuela. I think probably a little different today with all the crises they have going on in there, but you see some of the squatter settlements that are very informal. Some cases they don't have services, no electricity, official anyway. People do find ingenious ways to do it. And then they go, so you can see that, you can see a little more of that, a little more better housing that tends to be in the center. You know, some businesses still happen in the middle. And of course, the major corporate and all that stuff is going to be in the middle, in the central business district. Now here are some pictures of some of these settlements. The ones that you see, the picture just showed up is in Peru. Here's what you see in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Usually the wealthier individuals live right by the sea. That's where you see the high rises, the penthouses, the really wealthy individuals live there. And the people in the poorer people live in the favelas, which you see those conglomerate of housing, very informal housing on the hills. They have better views, but they usually very poor, no electricity or at least official anyway, and more different conditions. When it rains, there's all kinds of problems and lots of poverty in those areas. So anyway, so that's the difference in the way that the cities are organized when you compare with those of North America.
Is common in all cities in Latin America or just like
yeah, most cities are like that. Kind of like what I was indicating in North America, that there's variations within that. That there are variations, like I say, some people are moving back to the cities. A lot of millennials are moving back to cities, they're gentrifying, this and that. But for the most part, this is the model that you're going to find all across Latin America. In general,
okay.
like I say, with smaller variation. In Brazil, for instance, the central business district of Rio is where you see those buildings out by the ocean, right? So because of the geographic situation, not necessarily the center right of the city, but that's where everything is happening. But what it does apply is that you go to the periphery, which in this case is going to be the hill, and that's where you're going to see the favelas. So, like I say, depending on the geography of the place, it will be variations, but the pattern, what the model allows us to see the pattern in general terms. That makes sense?
Yes. It
So
does make
now,
sense.
for population in the Caribbean, you're going to see again certain patterns. There's a lot of population density, and most people in the Caribbean, 85% of them live in the Greater Antilles, which are the bigger islands. Cuba, Dominican Republic and Haiti. Those are, there's also in both Puerto Rico and Kingston and Jamaica. Those are going to be the places where most people are going to live in the Caribbean. You can see some of those smaller islands, they have some clusters of population, but the majority of the people are going to live on the Greater Antilles. Remember those population pyramids? Here's some examples on when you are comparing countries that are in different stages and their on the demographic on patterns in terms of the demography. You can see Uruguay has a pretty much almost a solid sort of a pyramid with leading towards sort of the population getting older. It's starting to sort of straighten out. It looks very similar to that of the United States, but the numbers are increasingly becoming, so the working class population is increasing and slowly the population is aging as well. You compare that with Guatemala, where you have the typical pattern of a poor developing country where you have a huge growth of young people. So you see a broad base at the bottom. Population under 20 years of age is huge in Guatemala. And you compare that to Uruguay, very different. There's a few things, of course, in Guatemala. There's a lot of people that there was issues with civil wars that devastated a lot of the population. You even see a little bit of an evening, particularly at certain periods of time, where there are more females than there are males. Now, many of these also impacting that a lot of the sort of working age population around here also leave Guatemala and they head over to the United States, mostly the United States, some cases to Mexico, in other cases, or at least Mexico on the way to the United States. Again, these are 2014 figures. Guatemala made in fact, if anything, the base may be broader now. In Uruguay, the base may actually be evening out a lot more and getting towards the older population. Now we can see this in the Caribbean. We can compare Cuba with Haiti. Cuba is showing again more of the pattern of a more developed country, even though of course it's not necessarily a developed country by any means. But you can see more of an even pattern. You guys see the bulge on the sort of 45 to 30 to 45 population? Anybody may have an idea of why that might be? And you can put in the chat or you guys know what happened in 1959? So in 1959 was the time of the revolution. So so people that say are probably going to be in their late 50s, 60s or so, they're sort of the survivors of the revolution. So you see there's a lot of people there. But typically after some of those big conflicts, there tends to be a baby boom, and that's kind of what Cuba had after the revolution in there. And then you can compare with Haiti, which is very broad base, huge number of young population in Haiti. And so you can see the differences in terms of, and there's also again a lot of the working age population that usually leaves Haiti to the country. There's a mass exodus of Haitians that left to Brazil during the right before the World Cup and the Olympics to work. Of course, there has been a lot of issues with HIV, where many of these it was rampant in many of the islands, but Haiti was hit very hard by HIV. So a lot of sort of working age population also disappeared, or in both males and females. It wasn't restricted to males by any means. But so you can see some of the patterns of population involved with sort of the implication for Haiti. These are young people require support, require services, schools, so on, and that presents a lot of challenges uh, for the governments in Haiti to provide. And Cuba is sort of going the other way. Again, showing more pattern for the evening of the pyramid, heading towards also that big group between 35 and 45 will be getting older at some point and will require different set of services. Now, so one of the big things that happens in Latin America, of course, is European migration. Of course, initially there was a period of time where there's migration going into Latin America. We had a lot of Europeans that moved to Latin America for various reasons. We see that in Brazil quite a bit. You can see very different arrows. The red arrows indicate where people were coming from. Now you also see a lot of flows of population. We have what we call intermigration and intra-migration. So intra-migration being populations are, let me see, really quickly here. So it's a little feature that allows me to write things out like on a board, but I have to be switching screens. So let me see, yeah. Do it a little bit. I'm still figuring a lot of stuff out, just like you guys are. I'm trying to figure out there's a version where anyway I can write some of this down. But so we have intra migration is between. Inter is of course coming from outside of the United States, from outside of Latin America, or coming into Latin America. For migration, immigration, and immigration. Immigration with an I, immigration with an E. Immigration being the one that where people are leaving Latin America, and immigration is that are coming in. Now, in early 1900s or so, there was huge movement of people from Europe into Argentina and the southern part of Brazil. In Argentina, it was a huge number of Italians that actually moved into South America, into Argentina, and Uruguay as well. In Brazil, southern part of Brazil, around Sao Paulo, there's also a large movement of Germans that actually move into that area. And you can see that pattern of population and you see the diversity of those places. There's also Asian migration. There's a huge Japanese migration in around Sao Paulo as well. So there are huge sort of Japanese towns in Sao Paulo. We had also a lot of growth of Japanese into Peru. Peru has had a large number of Japanese that have been coming into Japan. They had sort of settled into Japan, into Peru. And again, sort of continues to have that back and forth migration. Let's see. Of course, now the biggest portion is immigrants, people that are leaving. With an E, there are people that are leaving Latin America, and you can see the places where they're going. In Ecuador, a lot of people go to Europe, to Spain, largely. There's a few people in Brazil that are moving to Portugal. Again, a lot of the same migration that the 1900s came into Latin America. Sometimes there's also connection where people leave towards some of those countries. So in Argentina, you see movements of people from Italy and Spain. And the same thing in Peru, there's a lot of back and forth. In fact, Peru has had a couple of presidents of Japanese ancestry. Now, you start moving north and say in Central America, in Mexico, then most of the migration is towards the United States. Again, there's a few places like in Peru and Ecuador and Venezuela that go to the United States as well, but the majorities of the of the people that are going to the United States, that are migrating to the United States, come from Mexico, as well as Central America. More so in Central America today. I mean, the pattern changed constantly. The biggest migrations from Central America right now to the United States is the biggest numbers that are moving to the United States today are from Central America. Now, the issue of remittances, you can see that term over here in blue. That issue of remittances, basically, remittances is money that is sent back to the countries of origin for many of these migrants. So let's say you are working in Guatemala, working in the United States, working in Los Angeles perhaps, and you're saving some money, and every month or so, perhaps you send remittances back to the family in Guatemala. And we'll see later on when we talk about economics that many of these countries heavily rely on these remittances that's how people survive. You know, people get money from people working in the United States. And of course, you know, in Ecuador, we have the same thing. We have a lot of domestic workers in Ecuador that work in Europe. And the same thing, they send money to Colombia. But in huge numbers in Central America in particular, the percentage sort of per capita is really big, larger in Central America than they say in Mexico. A lot of people do that the same thing in Mexico. They've been doing it for years. But in terms of per capita, you compare to say the percentage of the population that rely on remittances is a lot bigger in Central America. Of course, countries are a lot smaller. In the Caribbean, we have, again, lots of immigration. You can see the lines in blue right there. Those are people that are leaving, or in purple from different places. The lines in blue are people that are leaving, say, to the UK. Jamaica, for instance, is a former colony of the UK, and so many Jamaicans moved to Europe. Large number of them to the UK. We have some in, for instance, in Trinidad and Tobago that also move over to the UK. Of course, a lot of them also move to the United States, particularly in the southeastern part of the United States. Cubans, of course, in Miami, Haitians, as well as in Miami, Dominican Republic. And so a lot of migration from the Caribbean goes out into the United States. Because Puerto Ricans, of course, Puerto Rico is a commonwealth of the United States. Damien, I think you were asking about German towns in Argentina. Yes, in fact, the numbers have been always really hard to describe because many of them were secret. I mean, they didn't want to be found. And so there's no actual documentation, or very little documentation. I think more recently people have been trying to begin. But yeah, there was a considerable number of expatriates from Germany that were escaping prosecution because they were Nazis, you know. And so there's now not all Germans, of course, that went to Rio were Nazis, right? But I think mostly in Argentina and some parts of Uruguay and Paraguay is known to have. Many of these individuals are probably extremely old. Many of them have probably died already. I was watching a documentary the other day that there was one guy that was searching for these guys and was trying to sort of find them and make sure they were prosecuted and so on. But some of these guys are 80s and 80s, some of them 90 years old, and so it was it was just mostly to make a historical point about the crime they committed. Some of them were Nazis that were hiding away from global persecution. Right? So again, high negative migration rates, mostly people leaving as opposed to coming in into the Caribbean. Now, in terms of, we start moving a little bit into the cultural sort of theme now of Latin America. One of the things that happened in terms of the population, and sort of the coherence that we had in Latin America, has to see with, of course, the connection that it had with Europe, largely the colonial period. It was not a very simple sort of exchange of cultures, of products, and so on. Uh, they refer to that, and this, you don't have this picture in your text, right? I'll probably from somewhere else. But this is an important thing about that exchange that happened between Europe and America. We refer to that as the Columbian, as you see in the letter here, the Columbian exchange. That means that products were being sent uh, from the United States, from Americas into Europe, and then in return, Europe was bringing things up over to Europe. Many of the products that in many cases we associate with Latin America or the Americas actually are product of Europe. And you can see that. So from the Americas, squash, pumpkins, turkeys, and so on. Tomatoes are from the Americas, yet seem to be more known for Italian and so on. And vice versa. Then we had again a lot of products that are now very common in the Americas. Say bananas, for instance, sugarcane. Bananas, I think they were brought up from Africa into Europe, and then eventually brought into Americas. And of course, some of the biggest ones happen to be diseases that were brought in by by the Europeans that came into the Americas, where the Americans, the indigenous people of the Americas, didn't have any immunity. So some of the very common transmittable diseases like influenza, malaria, smallpox in particular, kill millions of indigenous people in the Americas. Um, um, they brought cattle, for instance. In fact, uh, people have studied this whole sort of uh, maybe involuntary genocidal thing that we see here. That one of the reasons supposedly, or one of the theories explains that one of the reasons why Europeans are a higher level of immunity to some of these diseases is because they have more contact with cattle, livestock, whereas the indigenous people didn't. And so that was, they had no immunity to some of these diseases. So eventually the Europeans brought cattle, horses, pigs, that kind of stuff into America. So again, in some cases, this is what uh, culturally it led to the blending of cultures. Indian with Spanish, it led into what they call the mestizo, mestizaje. But in many cases, the resilience, and we'll talk about that later on, the resilience of indigenous people was saved. And in many cases, also, this whole, it was not a voluntary assimilation in that many cases, particularly when it came to religion, you were forced, if you were an indigenous person in Mexico, the Spanish would force you to become Catholic. You're primitive, and if you don't become Catholic, anyway, so you were forced to assimilate. So again, we call this the demographic. It goes by different names. When they talk about this, is this sort of involuntary genocidal thing that happened. But in general terms, basically, we had a demographic crisis. The indigenous population was reduced by like 90%. The people that were living there when the Spanish came was reduced by 90%. Again, mostly disease, in many cases, simple just warfare, getting military power of the Spanish or the Portuguese, and forced labor and so on. This is also one of the reasons why African slaves were brought into the Americas, as the population of indigenous people were drastically reduced. They needed some other sources of labor, and that's what it led to bringing huge numbers of African slaves into the Americas. Um, Again, some areas have been surviving this. We still have huge areas in many parts, particularly isolated regions of the Americas, that have remained pretty close to the roots that they always had, even before the Spanish came in. Many of these, for instance, again, the different levels of how much they are allowed to maintain their identity, the territory, and so on. And that's different in different countries in Latin America. Some regions, of course, fight literally very strongly to maintain their autonomy. Places in Brazil are currently doing that. A lot of the Amazonian regions, as the frontiers expanding, as deforestation is happening, many of these lands are heavily indigenous, and as they come in and take down the forest, and they well, hey, there's people living here too, and some of these indigenous groups try to assert their identity. A few places like Paraguay, for instance, Paraguay, I think that's Paraguay has actually maintained that identity, and Paraguay is one of the few countries in Latin America where an indigenous language, in the case of Paraguay, is Guarani. Let me try this. I have to try this this feature that allows me to put something in. Allows me to put something on a. Say a white word now, right? So I can do this. So yeah, that's the population, the indigenous population of Paraguay. They speak Guarani, and so they have been able to basically the Paraguayan Paraguay has become one of the places in the world where an indigenous language, in this case of Guarani, is part of the official language of course, Spanish is also another official language. It's not unusual for some countries to have 1, 2, even 3 official languages. And in Paraguay, Guarani is one of them. In Bolivia, for instance, and parts of Peru, in some cases, is I'm blanking out of here. What's the language of the? Not. Anybody remember what I'm talking about? Let me look at that. There you go. We can chat back on. Yeah, I think it's Quechua. Yeah, so in many places, Quechua is sort of a de facto language, and a lot of people in Bolivia, in parts of Peru, speak Quechua far more often than they do Spanish. Let's see. So when we look at the patterns of visiting culture in Latin America, this is what we see in terms of languages. We see Spanish very, very dominant, with the exception, of course, Portuguese in Brazil. Those are the 2 dominant languages. And like I was saying earlier, there are places, and you see the one for the S right here, where lots of these places, there's actually more Quechua spoken than there is some Spanish. You see some areas in the purple here, what I was just talking about earlier, we have Guarani, which is language that is spoken in the Pantanales, parts of areas of Paraguay, bordering Brazil, and even the northern part of Argentina, but largely spoken in many parts in Paraguay. In Mexico, you'll see, particularly the southern part of Mexico, you see clusters of various languages that are spoken by different indigenous groups. In the Maya and the Yucatan Peninsula, you see huge numbers of people speaking Maya, largely Mayan. But there's a few others in that area that are, that basically have been spoken for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Other parts of Oaxaca, some of the isolated areas of Oaxaca, large numbers of people speak Mixteco, Zapoteca, Zapotec. In Central America, you have large portion, for instance, in Nicaragua, they have Mixcuo. You see Indians at what they call the mosquito area there. So again, different parts are going to speak different languages, but most of the people in the Americas are going to speak either Spanish and Portuguese. Now, and I'll go back to that in a minute here because the Caribbean is a little bit different. So again, this is an area of the world, like I say, the major influences are going to be these three cultures that I was telling about: the European colonial presence, African influence, largely brought in by the African slave, and then the mixtures of both European and African cultures led to mestizaje, where you have indigenous people as well as European mixing together. And in parts of Brazil, for instance, there's mixings of European and African cultures as well. Some pictures I took when I went to Puerto Rico. Not everybody, this is actually a statue of Christopher Columbus. And if you celebrate the Spanish, as the Sino of the Indians, talking about killer of Indians. I think periodically some of these, I think this was left over from around October when they celebrate, many people still celebrate Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovery of the Americas, and many people are not on board with that. So anyway, let's throw some pictures out there. Now, in one of the biggest things that happened, again, largely as a result of the decimation of indigenous populations, is the fact that African slaves were brought into the Americas. And they created what is called an African diaspora, meaning people were being brought over from Africa, of course not voluntarily but forcefully, to the Americas. And you can see the sort of the movement of these involuntary movement of Africans. You can see the numbers, and you can see why, for instance, Brazil has such a huge.
Professor,
Yes.
we cannot see the numbers. Or
Oh, you're not seeing that anymore?
no, we're seeing Warani on the yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Now
Thank
you
you,
see it
thank
now?
you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we see it.
every once in a while, like
Perfect.
I move the screens, and then I move the screens, and I forget to that I have to. This is something I have to get used to. I forget that I share again. I'm sharing something,
Yes.
all of a sudden I stop sharing, and then I have to go back to sharing again. Uh, so very likely you did not see what I was showing earlier. Let's see. Yeah,
Could you go back so we can see the yes, thank you.
yeah. You see that one? That one. When I was talking about the pictures from Puerto Rico. Here's the monument to Christopher Columbus, and you see that now, right? It says the Asesino de Indios. Killer of Indians.
Yes, 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 you can see it.
It's
Yes.
not very, like you say, it's very different views about the legacy. And of course, it's still, when you go to Puerto Rico, you'll see a lot of these sort of forts where basically showing a lot of the sort of the battle that were happening in the Caribbean in terms of the different cultures. There's some places there, see, or you overlook at the Caribbean, and you can almost picture a battle between the Danish, the Dutch, the Spanish, trying to, and the British to trying to dominate, gain control of different islands, in particular in the Caribbean. So now, speaking of the African presence here in the Americas, is we refer to that as the African diaspora, with all these Africans that were brought into the Americans. So you can see the huge number. For instance, what I was talking about earlier, before you couldn't see it. From Brazil, there was about 3 million 646 African slaves that were brought into Brazil. And you can see that it pretty much is bigger than any of the other areas in Americas that were brought in. A lot of people of African descent were brought into the Caribbean, of course, the British Caribbean, the Spanish were bringing a lot of them into Cuba. And so you can see the heavy African influence in the Caribbean. Again, most of these forceful slave trade was done basically in areas where plantations were taking hold. You see the southern part of the United States, where at that time they were using for cotton production, but earlier than that it was basically sugarcane, tobacco, products like that that were being with African labor was used to send over to. So again, and you can see the places where most of these came from. So you can see that there's a huge number. Basically, the tendency of African people, African descent Americans, is going to come from mostly the western part of Africa. Now, so some of the influence that we see, in particular, we see a huge influence of that in the Caribbean. We see it also, of course, in Brazil, and to some extent, of course, in parts of Central America, particularly in the Caribbean side of Central America, and even in the southern part of Mexico. Not discussed as much, but it still does. So some of the influences that we had, and let's talk about some of them here, in particular in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, largely in Jamaica, although there are other Caribbean islands where this happened. Yeah. Okay. So everybody see now the slide. I know Fernando was saying about the screen. Anyway, so the Maroons were a big one, and now the Maroons actually comes from a Spanish term, cimarron. Some of you may know that it's basically those cimarrons are the mountain sheep, mountain goat, mostly mountain sheep, right? So the name stuck in English as maroon, and maroons were basically slaves that run away, and they run away to the mountain, they run away to the hills. You can see in Jamaica, the central part of Jamaica is mountains, basically a mountain region. So many of these maroons will just split. They will leave their slave owners, and they will go congregate up in the maroons. There's some maroons in a few of the other islands. Mainly, we see some in actually in Mexico. Southern part of Mexico has some maroons in there. Similar things, some in Belize, and a few there's a few in Nicaragua and the Caribbean part of Costa Rica. We still see some remnants of maroons. Now in Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago, for the same reasons that African slaves were brought into the Americas, in Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname, which is the rim of the Caribbean in South America, they actually brought Indians from Asia, like Hindu, right? And they were brought in as indentured laborers. These were not actual slaves, simply they were people that were saying, we're going to send you out there to work. And they will be paid almost nothing. But again, in many cases, they were, they needed the work. They will sort of give them a place to live, they would feed them and stuff like that. And sometimes they were able to save some money. But for the most part, it would be basically brought in to work in the science. So today, in places like Trinidad and Tobago, you're going to see a big presence of a big influence from Hindus, South Asian, from India, in those places. So again, today you see a lot of these influences in the Caribbean and parts of Brazil, particularly the northern part of Brazil, was a huge influences from African influences and like I say, Asian in Suriname, the Guyanas, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the things that happened in the Caribbean was this whole concept of creolization. The idea is that you're blending African, European, in some cases, even American indigenous populations are coming in as well. And so you'll see a lot of people, you see the whole mixture. So the whole Creole identity is basically complex, it changes over time, and so on. We even see some of that influences in New Orleans. We have French influences, European influences, native influences, and it sort of creates a whole sort of different idea. And not only in language, which is one of the most easily identifiable places, but also is shown in things like food and music and stuff like that. In terms of languages in the Caribbean, it's a little bit different than what you see in the Americas, where you mostly have Spanish or Portuguese. Uh, in the Greater Antilles, in Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, you see a lot of Spanish. It's going to be that dominant. But for instance, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Belize, those are all former colonies of the UK. So you see a lot of English spoken there. And out of the smaller Antilles, you see a lot of influence from French. And then most of those are going to be French speaking. And then even Dutch. We have some islands, particularly Curacao, one next to Venezuela, up in the Caribbean. And there's a few of the Virgin Islands that are, one of the Virgin Islands that is actually Dutch. So it's a little bit different. And you see the Guyanas, where basically there are three different ones in there. You got one that is English, Suriname, which is not an official country, is mostly Dutch, former Dutch colony. And French Guiana is still actually a colony. It's still not an independent country. So lots of mixtures. In fact, while you see, while say in Jamaica, for instance, people speak English, but it's creolized. They call those patois, which is sort of a mixture of English with mostly African sort of influences. Sounds very different. If you ever heard Jamaican speak, or even sometimes you hear like even Central Americans in Panama, for instance, a huge influence of African influence in Panama. They speak it very differently and very fast, and sometimes it's hard to understand what they're saying. When I was in college, I had a lot of Panamanian friends. We were going to school there, and we would hang out. And I mean, I got used to it eventually. And the first time I couldn't understand half of what they were saying, and speak very fast, very different, but still Spanish. So anyway, let's see. I think we're winding down that. So a few things about the global reach of Latin American culture. And I'm kind of going to pause probably in a few minutes here because I want to see everybody and want to kind of take roll right here. I'm just going to basically look at the list here and then sort of put a mark for those of you who are attending today. And but anyway, so this is the last slide I'm going to show you. Now, again, I'm going to be recording this, and you already see that I already have the slides, and the slides are already in the modules. So welcome to see that. I mean, it's not different from what I'm showing here. They're in color and everything. And you also know that you have the videos, slightly different version, but you see the videos of this. And after we finish this session here, I'm going to convert this recording into a YouTube, and I'm going to post it on Blackboard, on Canvas as well. We're eventually going to get used to this modality, but hopefully it's not going to be as difficult for us as a lot of stuff has already been done like that. But we'll be adjusting, and hopefully we'll be able to get most of the classes if we was face to face. So let me do this real quick. So anyway, so let's see, I'm just gonna, so let me look very quickly at who is here right now, and then I'll just take a quick roll here. I'm not gonna really call your name, and I'm just gonna see. So let me see real quick. So while I do this, you guys, is this thing is gonna work out okay? Yeah, let me unmute you. How you doing with your other classes? Let me let me unmute you here. So and you guys can unmute yourselves too. You know that, right?
Yes, yes, we
There
know.
you go.
Oh, this is the only class I'm
Uh,
having online as of now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is the first one you actually do so far.
Yeah, I like it. I enjoy it. Well, I think it doesn't replace the actual thing, but it's a good substitute.
It's not as great as being in school, but Zoom isn't a bad option. It's nice being able to hear you talk, and we
Yeah.
can have a discussion as a class if we need to or whatever. It's definitely that.
Yeah.
I'm happy that we live in 2020 when this pandemic's happening. It'd be really terrible if we were in
Oh yeah.
like
I
2000
can't even
and we had
imagine.
to do paperwork or just cancel our classes. It wouldn't be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's as hard as it sounds. Like I say, I mean, and I know it's different classes. I mean, I can see we're in a department we have a lot of people with labs. I mean, I usually teach labs too, but I'm not teaching this semester. Thank God. I can't imagine doing a lab. You know, how will you do a lab with this? You know, there's ways to do it, but it's definitely going to take a lot of that. A lot of that. You know, I guess the hands-on experience that you expect to get with a lab.
Yeah.
So you said this is the only class that most of you have done so far with like this?
For me, this is my only class that I'm taking online. The other classes got suspended indefinitely.
Are you serious? They just simply, yeah, because I hear that some professors just don't want to do this. I mean, I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. And I think they're giving some of them the opportunity to do that.
I mean, we still have assignments and stuff. We're just not doing any online class through Zoom. It's just turning in stuff.
So like I say, we'll get used to this method. Like I say, I'm learning as well. I'm still taking classes. I take at least one or two every day and then learn different features, and hopefully we'll make a better experience for you guys. I'm trying as hard as I can. Um, like I say, the assignment is not going to be much of an adjustment, but like I say, I'll explain when we get to the test how we're going to handle that. And if you've taken an online class before, maybe you haven't, but if you have, I mean, there's ways to be done. And you know, we'll make the best of it. It's not going to be exactly the same, but I think we'll make it work. Let's see. Maybe if some people. Let's see. I saw Rufo earlier, and I don't see Cassidy. Do you hear me, Cassidy? Are you out there, maybe? Yeah, I don't see Gerardo. Oh, they're here. Yeah, here. And Naomi Diaz is here. If you hear me, Naomi, maybe. Anyway. Well, you guys, so we'll survive the first day. So, like I say, I think just to, we'll finish Latin America. But I don't know I don't know if you would think this is a good idea, but I'm just going to do that. Like I say, that reggae thing that I've been telling you about. I think you'll enjoy that. To kind of get you off a little easier, and then just head on into yours. Like I said, there'll be hopefully an opportunity for you guys to rest a little bit, to relax, and not much we can do. We can't go outside that much, and at some point it starts to, you can only watch enough Netflix or I've been watching like I go into YouTube a lot and I watch like they have these tours of cities, because you can get the geography on me. So you go into these tours. It's really cool. Some of them you can actually get to walk around different cities in the world. Anyway, but we'll see. All right, guys. So enjoy, stay safe. Like I say, follow the stuff that we already see in San Francisco with all these really, staying away, the social distancing that is helping bring the curve down. Angela, you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about the honors.
Yeah, I'm waiting to get some directives from the people out there, but I am going to tell you straight up that I think they're probably going to be canceling that.
Well, I know with Mesa that they're honoring it still.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm gonna talk to the coordinator. I haven't heard back from him yet after that email that I sent him. But I'm gonna see what he wants me to do with that. And like we talked about, there's a lot of sort of hands-on stuff that we were supposed to do. So I'm not sure how you're gonna do it, but yeah, maybe you and I can talk individually, and let me follow up with one of the coordinators there and see how they handle that. Uh, Even though we're a district together, sometimes people seem to handle it a little bit different in different schools. So,
okay.
I'll follow up with you on that. Okay, I won't. All right.
All right.
Any other final questions, you guys, before we hold? So again,
No.
I apologize for the issues at the beginning, but we'll get it done and try to do it. All of you guys link into that. Get into that link. I think it was me that was in the room, and so
Yes.
you went to the link and it takes you right into this area, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But you wouldn't see me. Is that what was happening?
No. What it showed to me, it showed that you were like in another meeting, and I couldn't join
Oh,
first.
yeah. That's probably what happened. Like I say, I might somehow probably signed in a different place. I do have, right now I have two classes, but in two different schools, and they use different IDs, so it's kind of crazy that way. But I think we'll figure it out. So, like say, I click on that again. I want to make sure that I am on that meeting to make sure that when we start on Thursday, that we'll do it again. Well, you guys again, stay safe. Stay away from each other, social distancing, right? Follow what they're telling us, and take care of your more exposed people. Especially your elder relatives. And if you need to go out, like shopping and stuff, and use a lot of sanitizer and all that kind of stuff, right? All right, guys, don't worry, everything's gonna be all right. Okay,
All right.
take,
Bye.
take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you Thursday.